Stand up at the cave of the Heilige Reb Nosson Adler. Just to give you an idea, a story before we start about Reb Nosson Adler himself. Every Shabbos, here in Germany, in Frankfurt, one of the Talmidim of Nosson Adler would give a drasha, would speak in front of the Olam, would speak in front of the boys. And there was a young boy there, Moishela, and it was his turn to give the drasha for the Olam. There was a much larger gathering than normal, many new faces. Moishela's father, Rav Shmuel Sofer, was also there in order to enjoy the nachas of his son speaking. Razel, Moshe's mother as well, who we're going to speak about soon, was also there as well, standing with the door half open. And she drank in every word that came from her child's lips, even though she didn't understand much of what her son was saying. The boy started quietly, but his voice was clear and distinct and started to grow in volume. And all of a sudden he was on fire, with questions, with answers, backwards and forwards. Everyone forgot he was 13 years old at the time. Rav Nosson stayed in the room. As in his own private room, he didn't want to be embarrassing to the boys, that he would sort of listen to them, otherwise they'd be embarrassed. Rav Nosson Adler's listening to their Divrei Torah. It was embarrassing. So he didn't want to stay in the room. He was in the room next door, but he also listened. Suddenly there was an interruption. The boy stopped and he burst into tears. He'd been discussing a question that was raised by his maternal great-grandfather. And he spoke as if he was discussing it with his great-grandfather. And he wanted to say, and he was about to say, what you say, great-grandfather, is nonsense. But what he said was, with all due respect, great-grandfather, here you are wrong. Mechutzav, his father called out, who was there by the drasha, and he slapped the boy's face. The boy started to cry, and everyone in the crowd was silent. From Nosson Adler, the Rebbe comes inside, and he says, Moshe, continue. You haven't finished. The boy stopped crying, and he resumed slowly and hesitantly. He was embarrassed and he was ashamed, but eventually his voice picked up speed, it picked up strength, and he finished confidently. From Nosson Adler embraced him, kissed his forehead, and he said, your great-grandfather has tremendous, tremendous hana in Gan Eden. And when the boy's mother, when Moishela's mother, Razel, was leaving, Rav Nosson said, I want you to leave the boy with me. I'm going to look after this boy. My wife will look after her material needs. I'll look after his spiritual needs, and he'll be fine. This boy was none other than the Heilige Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer was a Talmud of Rav Nosson Adler. Rav Nosson Adler was one of the most important figures in Ashkenaz Yiddishkeit. Born in 1751, died in 1800. He was only 49 years old when he died, and he never forgot anything. He knew everything. He was a Talmud of the Pnei Yeshua. His father was a Talmud. He also learned by the Pnei Yeshua. At the age of 20, he opened up a yeshiva, and he never ever wrote down Divrei Torah. Why? Because he held it was awesome for him to do so, because he remembered everything. He never forgot anything, so there was no het of him to ever write anything down, which is why we barely have any Svarim and Torahs from Rav Nosson Adler. He was into Pashtus in the Sugya. Very simple way of teaching. Boys would come with a question in Tosfos. He would start with the Gemara, go through the Rashi, and then the Tosfos, all by heart, of course. And by then you were like, I can't remember what my question was. Because the way he understood it, the way he taught it was in such pashtus. He was a huge onov. He insisted that no one calls him Rov or Rabbi or Rebbe. They called him Mr. Adler. The Chassam Sofer writes about his Rebbe. We know the Chassam Sofer doesn't need any introduction. The Chassam Sofer is writing about his Rebbe, Reb Nosson Adler. And he says that his Rebbe understood what went on in Shemayim for things that were even beyond the Malachim. As I look the Chassam Sofer about his Rebbe, Reb Nosson Adler, the Chassam Sofer writes about him like he was a Tana. He davened, very interesting, he had a certain amount of things, he had a bunch of shitas that the Olim were very, very against. Caused him a lot of agmas nefesh. One of his shitas was he davened with a Sfadi Havara. He davened a Sfadi Havara because he held that was the Ikka. It was more meduyuk, it was more precise, so he davened with a Sfadi Havara. And he also held that you have to duchen, he was a kohen as you could see, he duchened every single day in Chutz La'aretz, even though the Ramah says we don't, he held that you do. Now you have to remember, Germany was a very proper place, very into them in Hogim, right? A place where there was one Rov, there was one decider. Over here comes Reb Nosson Adler with his own little minion, and he makes his own zach, completely doing his own thing. They were roid of him. They put him into Chayrim, 1782. He was 31 years old at the time, so he left. He couldn't take it. He left with his Talmud, the Chassam Sofer. They went to another city. He got kicked out of that city because, again, they couldn't take these strange minhagim. What's he doing? Doesn't make any sense. He went back. He came back over here to Frankfurt. By this time, he told the Chassam Sofer, don't follow me. At age 30, Reb Nosson Adler never saw his Talmud again. They put him in Cherem, and eventually he was nifter from that. He couldn't take the Agmas Nefesh. They tried, the Sof Yomov, to pacify him. They couldn't manage. He left no children, and he also left no Sfarim. Very, very controversial figure. Someone, a Rebbe Muvik of the Chassam Sofer, someone that the Chassam Sofer said understood things in Shemayim greater than the Malachim. His Talmidim very much saved Hungary and Germany with the Torah that they spread. But it's interesting, because he was such a controversial person. In the Sefer Chut HaMeshulish, written by Reb Shlomo Sofer, the official biography of the Chassam Sofer, writes about an encounter of his Rebbe Reb Nosson Adler as a young boy and the Chidah. The Chidah took many trips, Kiyadua, to Europe, and he reached Frankfurt in 1852. He visited various communities, and he sees a young boy. He sees this young boy davening with so much kavana, intensity, and he arrived every day late around Oleinu time. That's when he walked in. Couldn't believe it. The kavana that he has in davening, but he shows up by Oleinu. What's pshat? So he went over to this little boy, Reb Nosson Adler. He said, why are you coming so late? So Reb Nosson Adler said, I cannot daven with the tzibur. It's poshet too disturbing for me. I can't do it. I can't daven with the tzibur. So the Chidah said, no, this can't be. And he asked him a kasha in learning, and he was so astonished when Reb Nosson Adler, a young boy, gave him a teretz of someone that was much older godel in that case. It's an unbelievable thing. It's actually what we say about Elisha Hanavi. It's on the Matsever as well. Hine no yadati ki isha lekimu kodosh hu aleinu. That's what the Chidah said about Reb Nosson Adler, and that's how he understood. Because it says, Kodosh hu aleinu, someone who's Kodosh comes at aleinu, and he understood that is Reb Nosson Adler. He was referred to as the Nesher HaGodel, the great eagle, which is Adler in German is an eagle. He was a pure soul. He couldn't take all the politics. He couldn't take everything that was going on against him, the chayim that they did about him. He was such an incredible Isha Leikim, Rebbe of the Chassam Sofer. We also have an opportunity to daven right here by the Rebbe of the Chassam Sofer. Just one last story about the Rebbe of the Chassam Sofer as well, that the Chassam Sofer recalls about the emunah of Reb Nosson Adler during the most tragic time in his own life. Chassam Sofer says, I learned by him, and he only had a small son and a 12-year-old daughter. She was very dear to him, and she emulated her mother's holy ways, and he loved everything about her. To our distress, she died all of a sudden, and the Rebbe of Nosson Adler did not shed one tear. He accepted the Rabbi Shalom's judgment with simcha. I never saw him on such high spirits, not even on Simchas Torah. And then came Shabbos Parshas Vayera. Shabbos Parshas Vayera, Reb Nosson Adler was always had the minhag of being called up to the Torah twice. He used to be called up twice, once as a Kohen, because he was a Kohen, and once to Mafteh. That Shabbos, during the week of the Shiva, right, he was in Shiva for his daughter, no exception, and while he was saying over the Haftorah, a single teardrop came from his eye, which he caught in his hand. The Chassam Sofer said never did he mention her again. We're talking about a year that's a mamash Isha Leikim, the Rebbe of the Chassam Sofer. Let's be mispalel a few moments for our own doiris, and then we should be daven that Reb Nosson Adler goes to Kisai Kovod and davens for all the Eis Lasos, the Eis Rotzen, and the Eis Tzorah that Klal Yisrael is holding in right now. We should be Zocher Be'ez Hashem, have a bit of a hashbah from Nosson Adler, Be'ez Hashem.